Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. What do you think,
Nice.
Darren?
That's well done.
A little nod to some Emerson, Lake, and Palmer.
Yeah, very
Way
well
back,
done.
way back in the day. Hey,
Absolutely.
sports fans, we're glad you're with us. It is playoff episode number one. We have the 12-team field. It's set. We have the bowl games. They're all set. And we're here to talk about all of that on
Yep.
this week's episode. Before we get there, though, the Heisman Trophy finalists were announced on Monday. Cam Ward, quarterback from Miami, Dylan Gabriel, quarterback from Oregon, Ashton Giante, quarterback or running back from Boise State, and Travis Hunter, wide receiver, defensive back from Colorado. Four deserving candidates, Darren. There's always
Yep.
arguments made for who was left off, but when you look at these four, who stands out to you the most?
Uh, well, first of all, let me express my disappointment that the Heisman voters, whoever that is, couldn't find in four top candidates at least one SEC player. But anyway, that's beside the point. But when you look at these four, I don't think there is a debate. I don't think there's a conversation. I don't think there's any controversy. I don't know how it's not Travis Hunter. I mean, I understand Dylan Gabriel had an incredible year. What, 30 touchdowns, 3,500 yards. But when you consider what Travis Hunter did on the offensive side of the ball, 1,100 receiving yards, knowing that he also did that, and it's not one of those things where he was a wide receiver that came in every once in a while as a cornerback, like in a nickel package, or he's a cornerback that came in to offer speed on the offense every once in a while. This dude played full bore, both sides of the ball all year long. And you can't, I mean, it is so impressive what he has done. To me, I don't know that there's any other choice outside of him. Uh, it, it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out because the other guys are impressive. The Ashton Gianti, that almost 2,500 rushing yards. There's something to be said for it. He didn't do it in the SEC. He didn't do it in the Big Ten. But at the same time, it's 2,500 yards. I mean, dadgum. It's 2,500 yards. That is getting things done, and you got to give props for that. You can't refute that. But I think Travis Hunter is such an obvious choice. I feel bad for the other three guys because they probably already know that. They probably saw it come out. It's like, well, at least we get a trip to New York. Yeah, that's worth something. What about you? Which one of them stands out to you?
To your point about SEC, I thought that Dylan Sampson might get an invite. He's had an
Yeah,
incredible year, really been the backbone of that Tennessee offensive
yeah,
attack. When
agree.
Nico has struggled, Sampson has been consistent, the go to guy, playing in, of course, the toughest conference
Yep,
out
yep.
there. I think this comes down to the two out of the four, and that is, and you mentioned this already, Travis and Ashton.
Hmm.
You cannot overlook Ashton's numbers. That's
Right.
phenomenal, the
Yep.
year he's having. And you could argue Boise State doesn't make the playoffs without him.
Very valid point. That's a very valid point.
They made their conference championship game, they won it. He showed up big time.
Yep.
Travis Hunter, an amazing athlete, the ability to play both ways, offense, defense, and perform at a high level as he has done.
Absolutely.
I don't think we've seen this in a long time.
Yeah, agree.
So you can make the case for him.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, to look at it from another angle, Colorado didn't make their championship game,
Very true.
conference championship game. Colorado didn't make the 12-team playoff. So that's one thing that kind of rests in my mind, that Ashton Giante, he led his team to that 12-team playoff.
Yeah, very true.
So you can't overlook that. But how do you overlook Travis Hunter? This is going to be a tough one. I think the media is probably going to go with Travis Hunter.
Right.
I think we'll probably see him come away with it, but definitely And Ashton Giante, we're going to see him put up more numbers. I'm interested to see how he does in the playoffs. See if he keeps putting
Yeah.
up those numbers.
Agree completely. I agree. And those are some really, really great points. And we've seen that have an effect before in the past where your team advanced to, working within the framework of you're part of what is, you're a huge piece of what's propelling your team to whatever that level is. And I think that's a very fair and reasonable argument. But also, part of what the Heisman is it's about the best player in college football, but also you do have to take into effect what you mean to your team. And to me, one of the things that still stands out about Travis Hunter, you lose him at some point during the season, you're replacing two positions. That's a big that's a big deal. But again, I do agree with the possibility that you could look at the Heisman your ballot and say, yeah, Travis Hunter is impressive. I'm going to put him as 2 on my list. But man, this Gianti kid, you take him from away from that team. They're 6-6 and they're not in the playoffs. I get that. I think that's a valid point in the conversation as well.
Yeah, if you take away Colorado's hiccup at Kansas, where they
Yeah.
they inexplicably lost that game that
Yeah.
knocked them really out of the conference championship
Yep.
game,
Yep.
I think it's open and shut. You go with Travis Hunter
Yeah. Agree.
because of what Colorado's been able to do, and like
Yep.
you said, he is filling two positions, which is
Yep.
phenomenal. So it's going to be interesting to watch how the voters come down. I think between
Yeah.
those two guys, you can't lose with either one of them.
Agree.
Speaking of interesting to see how it all shakes out, the 12-team college playoff field
Oh yeah.
is officially set and not without some controversy.
Yeah. A little bit.
After the 12 teams were announced and Alabama did not make the 12-team field, the Alabama athletic director, I just went blank on his name, came out and said they're going to have to look at their schedule. Darren, when you heard that, I mean, first of all, do you think the committee got it right, and how do you respond with the whole strength of schedule argument?
The one thing I will give the committee credit for is at least they were consistent. The only 3-loss team that made it into the playoff was because they got the automatic bid, which that's something we've seen happen because of automatic bids in basketball for years. You have a team that limped into their conference tournament, hit a hot streak, and all of a sudden they're wiping out the rest of their conference and running into the to March Madness on an automatic bid when there's no reason whatsoever outside of that for that team to be there. So we've seen that happen before, and I give them props that they were at least consistent. That's the only 3-loss team. And I think honestly, what this bracket shows us is if SMU wins that game, Clemson is not in. I think we do see that. So I give them credit for that. I can't argue that point. That being said, I do think there's also something you have to argue strength of schedule, and I think I don't think they truly dug into it. I almost feel like they refused to address strength of schedule from strength of conference. I think they didn't want to have that conversation, truthfully, and so they didn't. And so I think that's exactly why you have Alabama or South Carolina or Ole Miss, whoever your choice of flavor is to have the argument with of who should have been the team that made it in from the SEC over these other teams. That's the conference or the committee just refused to have that conversation. And so if that's not going to be considered, I do see the point of if all that matters is L's, and I'm going to, man, I must be tired. What did I make that 4 syllables? If all, must have been a long day and I didn't even realize how long it's been. If all that matters is wins and losses, how about if I say it that way? Then if I'm an SEC team, especially, why am I my strength of schedule, going by what it seems the way the committee looked at it, my strength of schedule is going to be incredible anyway because I'm going to playing ranked teams every week. I'm going to have the possibility of playing 1 and 2 loss or no loss teams every week because I'm in the SEC. So why would I schedule any game that's not an automatic W outside of my conference schedule? I, I can see that I can see that as a valid point. I don't think it's positive for college football, but I can see it as a valid point.
Yeah, it is valid because, look, the committee was in some ways in a no win
Right.
situation.
Absolutely.
SMU could have eliminated this controversy if they had beaten Clemson in the conference
Yep.
championship game. They didn't. The first half looked like they were going to get blown out. They come back, uh, lose by 3 points, and that changed the narrative. If
Yep.
Clemson blows out SMU is not in the 12-team field.
Yep.
Uh, this argument, though, about strength of schedule, I think uh, we need to understand what's happening here. When you look, for example, at Alabama's out of conference games this year,
Mm-hmm.
it's not it's not a difficult out of conference schedule.
Right.
Yes, they went to Wisconsin, which is typically a difficult place to play, but Wisconsin is not the
No.
Wisconsin of old, not this year at least.
Not. Yeah. Exactly.
Alabama shot themselves in the foot. They
Mm-hmm.
went to Nashville. Vanderbilt beat them, and Vanderbilt was so hot at the time. Then Vanderbilt ended up finishing 6-6.
Right.
The nail in the coffin for Alabama happened in Norman, Oklahoma. When they
Absolutely.
lost to the Sooners, they didn't even score a touchdown against an Oklahoma team that
Yep.
has looked awful, has struggled throughout this season. A lot of issues there.
Mm-hmm.
That killed Alabama because Oklahoma finished 6-6.
Mm-hmm.
Well, can you look at a team, and I agree the SEC is the toughest conference, but can you look at a team that's lost to two 6-6 teams and say we want them in the playoff? Now,
Right.
if they'd gone to their conference championship game and won it, yes, you can put them in, kind of the argument with Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
The problem here is that the SEC level of play is so stout, is so
Mm-hmm.
competitive.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the out of conference games that are going to kill the
Exactly.
SEC. It's the in conference games. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how you address that. Everyone agreed to this format, this 12-team
Right.
playoff,
That's
and
right.
this is where we are now. Texas went up to Michigan, played a huge game in the Big House when we thought Michigan was better than they were.
Right.
They ended up with a big win. LSU played an out of conference game against USC. We thought USC was going to be a lot better than they are. They beat LSU
Yep.
and sent the Tigers spiraling. Uh, so we want, as fans, those out of conference games. We want those big games.
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer LSU didn't start with one of those games.
Right.
But from a purely fan standpoint, we want those. If the committee does not figure this out, we
Mm-hmm.
will not see those big out of conference games.
Yeah.
Because you're
Absolutely.
exactly right. The SEC is tough enough, the conference
Yep.
schedule is tough enough that, boy, why would we schedule any top 25 team in an out of
Exactly.
conference game?
Yeah, and to your point, just the games you mentioned. Let's say Texas season goes exactly the way it did, or doesn't go exactly the way it has, and they have 2 conference losses, and then they slip up and lose to Michigan. Let's say Michigan was having a better year, they slip up to lose to Michigan. Now, if that's the way it happens, you're a 3-loss team that doesn't have a chance. If you'd have scheduled Western Michigan for that game, you're a 2-loss team that's probably in the playoff. Uh, that's where we are, and the committee has to figure out a way to fix that. You're exactly right, or it's going to have a significant effect on the future of the game in those big out of conference games that we want to see. We want to see Michigan and Texas. We want to see, Ohio State, Florida, whatever. We want to see those games, but there is zero incentive. That being said, all the teams, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Alabama, that we've talked about, simple statement by Nick Saban: handle your business. All three of those teams have a loss that should not have been a loss, that could have made a dramatic difference in the way their season ended and where their playoff hopes were for all three of those SEC teams.
Well said. Don't ever leave the game outcome up to the referees, and don't ever leave your future up to a committee of people. Take care of your
Absolutely.
business. Georgia took care of their business.
Yep. That's right.
That's why they're in the playoffs.
That's right.
Speaking of the SEC teams in the 12-team field, we have Georgia, we have Tennessee, and we have Texas. Those are the three SEC teams that made the 12-team playoff. Texas will host Clemson on December 21st in an afternoon game. Interesting matchup as Clemson comes to Austin.
Yep.
Darren, what's your feeling on that game? Is it Texas handily, or do you think this is going to be a game?
I do not think this is going to be a 5-12 matchup like we talk about in basketball.
Well played. Well played.
I don't think
Nice.
it's going to be that kind of game. I think Texas. I think Texas handles this game. I just don't. I mean, Clemson obviously has athletes, obviously has some speed, but I think it's going to be different when they're trying to do it in Austin. I think this is Texas is going to eliminate some doubters in this game, truthfully. How about you? What are your
Texas has a good setup. They've got Clemson at home.
Yep.
Then if they beat Clemson, they'll play at Arizona State.
Yep.
So that's a pretty good setup. Tennessee is traveling to Columbus to face Ohio State in a night game on December 21st. Who knows what the weather is going to be like in Columbus, Ohio in the evening on December 21st.
Yeah, did you hear Josh Heupel when he was asked about that? He's like, well, we practice outside. We played in cold. And I'm listening to that thinking, no, you haven't. You haven't played in Ohio cold. But anyway.
Columbus, Ohio, December 21st. There's a chance the sun might not come out at all that day.
Exactly. There's a difference in that in Knoxville cold. Sorry. There's just a difference. Go ahead. Sorry.
Tennessee, a much more difficult path. If they manage to beat Ohio State, they've got Oregon. They've got to travel across the country and play at Oregon. Again, that's going to be a cold weather game, January 1st game. So looking at the other, Georgia's got a first round bye. They will host the winner of Indiana, Notre Dame, which I fully expect that to be Notre Dame. We've shared our opinion on Indiana. They're one of the ones that have profited this year from a very subpar schedule. So that's kind of Georgia's kind of set up well, because then if they beat the winner of Notre Dame, Indiana, well, they'll play the winner of Boise State and whoever prevails in SMU Penn State game. So I think Georgia's got a very nice position there. A lot easier than Tennessee's.
Absolutely.
So, and probably a little easier than Texas's, but
I would agree.
Anyway, good position for those three teams. Well, Tennessee unfortunately didn't get that home game that they were hoping for.
And I think Georgia, when you look at their path, I mean, not to slight any of these teams, they made it to the playoff. But what you were saying, I mean, that's a nice, maybe a better way to say it, that's a manageable path to the to the semifinals. You know, when you look at Tennessee, when you look at Texas, I mean, we don't know what Oregon is going to look like matched up against SEC talent and SEC teams. But, I mean, they've had a great season. You can't deny that. They're sitting there undefeated. So that's a tougher path, just simply because for either one of them, it has to go through Oregon. They have to go through Oregon to get to the championship. Of course, now, like you said, Texas does have a better walk. Theirs is a little bit more equivalent to Georgia's to get to the semifinals. Tennessee's just here. Go to Ohio and win. Go to Columbus and win. Congratulations. Here's Oregon. Thanks. You know, that's tough. But I'd much rather be sitting in Georgia's spot than truthfully Texas or Tennessee, either one. Because at least Georgia is sitting there saying we might have to play Oregon in the championship game. I like that path a lot better.
Georgia does have some concerns. Starting quarterback Carson Beck injured
Yeah.
his arm. I think it's an
Mhm.
elbow injury,
Yep.
UCL, or
Yeah, I think
so
that's right.
significant arm injury. They're not
Yep.
sure how long he's going to be out for.
Yep.
They're working on him, of course. They're going to try to get him ready. I'm
Mhm.
not. I think I still like Georgia's chances, even
I
with
do too.
the backup quarterback. And what a difference from last year. Remember, Florida State lost uh, the Travis kid,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
The Jordan Travis, is that right?
yeah, they just fell apart.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, they have a backup quarterback. And the problem is they didn't keep winning.
Yeah.
Georgia found a way to keep winning in
Yeah.
that huge SEC championship game against Texas.
Yep.
He comes in, I forgot the kid's name. Boy, tough,
Gunner. Gun. Gun.
yeah,
Gun. Yeah.
tough kid. Took a
Yep.
massive hit.
Yep.
Helmet flew off. Carson Beck comes in, basically has
Yeah.
one usable arm.
Yeah. It's
Hands
here.
off to ETN, a
Yep.
Louisiana guy,
Yep. That's right.
and runs it right through the Texas defense. So I
How
still
much?
like this Georgia's. I still like Georgia's chances.
How much do you think the Florida faithful enjoyed watching ETN score that? That's painful. That's that's what a portal transfer portal at its finest right there. It's like, oh, that's hard to watch if you're a Florida fan.
Speaking of the transfer portal, it opened on
Yep.
Monday,
Yep.
and it's complete chaos. It's
Yep.
you were in LA recently,
Hmm.
Darren, and you just experienced the LA traffic.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of see the transfer portal.
Yeah.
It's that craziness, chaos.
Yeah, what's that main freeway? They call it the 405. I think that's what the transfer portal is.
Mm-mm-mm.
It's so crowded you can see the traffic from the plane. That's the 405. I think that's the transfer portal. And I have to tell you, I was in Hermosa Beach. Speaking of football and how it's transcendent, I'm in Hermosa Beach, California, walking a path like in between a row of houses and the beach, not necessarily on the beach, but just walking a path, a walking path. And there were several houses right here, and in three houses back to back to back. The first thing that got my attention was a Vanderbilt flag, an Ole Miss flag, and an Alabama flag.
Wow.
It's like, well, there you go. That's SEC football right there.
Go figure. Go figure. Goodness. Well, we also have bowl games coming up,
Yep.
and let's talk about a couple of bowl games that are really sticking out in our minds that we're looking forward to watching. Darren, what's one for you featuring an SEC team?
Well, I might have a little bit of interest in, I don't know, let's say Birmingham, but which is not that far away. So it's definitely being conversated about whether or not the trip to Birmingham is going to be made. But to me, the thing that jumps out to me about the Birmingham Bowl with Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech is I think this has a shot to be a fun game to watch. Neither of these teams are great teams, but neither of these teams are bad teams. I think it could be a very exciting, depending on how both offenses kind of take off. It honestly could be a very exciting kind of high scoring game with both teams ending up in high 20s to 30s. Um, so that was one of the first things that stood out to me because I feel like we don't say this a whole lot in bowl world because everything is so locked in with contracts and all this. I think the Birmingham Bowl people got it right. I think they used their tie-ins and actually chose what would be the best matchup for what they had available to choose from. I think it's going to be, let's see, what is that, on the 27th, I believe, of December? I think it's going to be a fun game to watch on that Friday afternoon. That was one of the first ones that stood out to me, of course. But how about you, Ben?
I like a couple of New Year's Eve games. Of course, the Texas Bowl, LSU traveling down to
Mm-hmm.
Houston to face Baylor. We haven't talked about Dave Aranda in a while on this show.
The ninja.
The Ninja, great defensive mind. And
Yep.
one of the things that's intriguing and at the same time frustrating about these bowl games is with the transfer portal, you're
Yeah,
not sure who's playing and who's not going
that's
to
right.
play.
Mhm.
So that I think as a fan, that kind of affects like, oh
Yep.
goodness, what are we getting into? So I think that will hurt LSU more than Baylor. I don't know
Yeah.
if Baylor's got a lot of guys entering the portal or opting out. At LSU, we've already seen today guys,
Mhm.
entering the portal. That's going to be interesting just because of the connection with Dave Aranda.
Yep.
It's also kind of deja vu when
Mhm.
Coach O was fired and Brian Kelly was hired. LSU went to the Texas Bowl. They played
Oh,
Kansas
that's right.
and they
It
had
had, like,
a wide receiver playing quarterback. They were decimated.
yeah, I was
It,
gonna say they had, like, 8 players or something, didn't they? I mean,
Brian Kelly did not coach in that game. He attended the game. I haven't talked to him about this. I'm going to take a leap here. I don't think he imagined he was going to be back in the Texas Bowl
no,
in his third year at LSU.
that's exactly right. But hey, see you at the national championship.
Hmm. And the other game that intrigues me is the Citrus Bowl on December 31st. South Carolina,
Yeah.
which the hottest team in the country right now.
Yep. Yep.
Some unfortunate losses kept them
Mhm.
out.
Mhm.
I'm excited to see Lenora Sellers. They're playing Illinois. Darren, I know there is medical EMTs crews on the scene of every college football game. That you might want to have some extras for this one. I
You're right.
anticipate the Gamecocks just rolling all over the Fighting Illini.
Yep.
If Shane Beamer keeps them focused, if they lose
Yeah.
their focus and they
That's a great
go and
point.
they just celebrate being at a bowl game and they don't take
Mhm.
it seriously, they'll get in trouble. But if South Carolina comes out and takes care of business, they're still going to be in the discussion
Yeah.
of, wow, what could that team have done if they'd been in the 12 team playoff?
Yep. That's exactly right. One less loss, what would they look like? That's exactly right. And I tell you one more to go on the opposite of what you just said. I'll go with Snooze Fest since you talked about exciting Iowa, Missouri. I mean, if they're offensive, and you assume there's going to be that a significant amount, not even saying a majority or anything, but there will be a significant amount of Missouri offensive players that probably don't play in the bowl game. Whew, half mercy. This could be a hard fought like 9-6, 12-9. It could not be good. It could be very hard to watch. It was it Monday at 1:30. That game Monday the 30th at 1:30. It could live up to a Monday afternoon game. I'm pretty sure. I would be concerned about that if I were. I don't even know what game that is. And oh, it's the Music City Bowl in Nashville. They, that crowd might be spilling out to downtown to Broadway about halfway through the second quarter.
Oh, goodness.
That could be
Uh,
bad.
yeah. One more I want to mention before we move on, and that
Mhm.
is the Independence Bowl. Through the years, we've seen some great matchups here in
Yep.
Shreveport at the Independence Bowl. Unfortunately, we don't always get the matchups we want. They got a great one in Army, a
Yeah.
terrific Army team
Absolutely.
that has played so well. They didn't play that well against Notre Dame, but the rest of the season they've just been spot on. A very
Yep.
very tough team. It was great to see the Independence Bowl get Army, and initially it sounded good. Oh, Marshall, they won their conference.
Hmm.
Then, as we were talking about, Darren, this is what kills these lower bowls. The Marshall coach, whose contract was not extended, I think he's heading to Southern Miss. Their
Hmm.
starting quarterback announced that he's entering the portal. You're not sure what Marshall team you're going to get, but it's not going to look like the conference champion Marshall. And
Right.
again, you've got people from Huntington, West Virginia. I don't know how many of them are going to travel down to Shreveport, Louisiana. You
Yep.
still hope for a regional, especially with a Army's going to
Hmm.
draw a lot. This is a military community with Barksdale Air Force Base. This is
Absolutely.
a patriotic community. We love the armed services and our servicemen and women here.
Mhm.
Army's the crowd's going to be completely pro Army. You would hope that they
Absolutely.
could have brought in a regional team. That just would have been a stellar matchup.
Yeah, agree completely. And you and I were talking before we started recording. I hope as the playoff kind of shakes out that one of the things that happens and hopefully I think these bowl games have proven throughout the years that they have some power. Maybe not the lower bowl games or the second tier, whatever. Don't mean to be insulting in any way, but they don't necessarily have as much power. But bowl games as a whole have the power. I hope at some point there is a movement that says, yes, we have a conference tie-in. If we can get, this, this, and this from the conference, then fine. But if not, regardless of tie-in, let us pick somebody that's going to travel. Let us pick somebody if we're the Independence Bowl from Texas or Southern, Louisiana or Arkansas or whatever. Let us grab somebody that's bowl eligible from those that people. Hey, that's 3 hours, that's 4 hours, whatever. Let's head to Shreveport and let's enjoy this game and pick up live audiences because I mean it's all about TV audience and we know that because that's the live eyeballs create the revenue. But I'd like to see some of that happen to boost and generate some live audience as well and be good for the host city. I think that would be a fantastic thing, hopefully, at some point.
Especially with being the night game on the 28th. You're
Exactly.
going to have a national audience.
Well,
I remember in 1999, we've talked about this before, going to watch Ole Miss,
hmm
led by senior quarter or running back Deuce McAllister,
hmm
playing against the Oklahoma Sooners, led by a young quarterback named Josh Heupel.
And now,
Those are
is that the
those
one
are
that
the
snowed?
matchups. No, no,
Okay.
that was the Texas A&M Louisiana Tech
Oh,
game
yeah,
the
that's
next
right. That's
year.
right.
But the opportunity to see the next year Oklahoma went on and won the national championship,
Yeah.
and now you're seeing Josh Heupel coaching at Tennessee, and that's part of those are the memories that you want to get from watching bowl games,
Yeah.
and I think we need to make sure that we don't take that away from the fans.
And the very thing you just said. I mean, think about the two teams you just mentioned. You mentioned SEC, Big 12. That's a reasonable capability or possibility with conference tie-ins. I think that should be some of the common sense that is applied to this. Why does the Independence Bowl not have an SEC Big 12 tie-in? I mean, you've got all the possibilities in the world. Exactly. It's all about if we bump up this and it's what draws the money. That's exactly right. But I'm hoping at some point with the playoff generating as much as we assume it's going to generate, that some of these other decisions can start to be regulated by common sense and care for the fan. That sounded dumb when I said it out. I know we're never going to get back to that, but at least throw it out there. Maybe somebody will pay attention.
Yeah,
That'd be
yeah,
great.
yeah. Memphis is going to the Frisco Bowl.
Yeah,
You know that would have been a good regional matchup.
yeah,
But yeah, anything with you're right, you're right. But it comes down to money, and
yeah,
bowls like the Independents are considered lower tier bowl games, and so they
hmm
basically get the leftovers.
yeah. You're
Except
exactly right.
except for the tie-in with Army, which was a great pickup. I want to say that
Yeah.
again. How exciting it is to have this great Army, the Black Knights, coming to
Mhm.
Shreveport to play in the Independence Bowl.
And you got to give props to the Independence Bowl people to go out when they lost the SEC tie-in. Well, SEC and Big 12 tie-in. That was one of the things they went out and sought. Is they have an option to pick up an academy team. It doesn't have anything to do with conference. They have an option every year to pick up an academy team. So you got to give them props, knowing the area. Very very smart pursuit and signing by the organizers of the Independence Bowl. You got to give them credit for that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great point, Darren.
Yep.
There's a lot more college football still to be played. We're
Oh yeah.
excited about it, and we know that you are. Would you do us a favor before you click off today? Would you hit that subscribe button? That means a lot to us
hmm
that you would take the moment to subscribe and follow us. gives you a notification anytime new episodes come out, and there'll be a lot of new episodes coming out during this bowl season. Maybe some special episodes as we wrap everything up and we get ready to move into the SEC college basketball season, which has already started. In the SEC, by the way, is very prevalent in the top 25, men and women.
Let's see, there's a team that's 9-1. Oh wait, that's Vanderbilt. All right, moving on.
And I think the team that's currently number one was it.
Who is that? Oh, they hadn't played Vanderbilt yet. I'm just saying. No, I don't mean that. I'm just kidding.
Well, thank you again for watching. New episodes come out typically sometime on Tuesday, depending on extenuating factors. How's that?
Yeah, that's well said. Depending on how slow Darren is, that's
it will come out on Tuesday unless it doesn't.
It's that, yeah, well said.
Thanks again for watching. Until next time, y'all take care.
Have a great week.
Thank you for making the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast your go-to sports show. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our show if you haven't already. Your feedback is so important. Let us know what you think about this week's show. Send an email to brewandshavers@gmail.com or a text to our text line 318-390-3599. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for listening to the Brew and Shavers Sports Podcast. See you next week.